Amina had finally gotten the interview she had always dreamed of, an editor position at Reed Publishing. It was the last stage of the hiring process, and all she had to do was edit a short passage and present her work to 2 panelists. She sat at the long meeting table, her palms sweaty as she spoke. She tried to sound confident, even though her heart was racing. Everything seemed to be going well until the door suddenly opened. To her shock, Japheth Reed, the owner of the company, walked in. He rarely attended interviews, but here he was, taking a seat right in front of her. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized him instantly. It was the same man she had kissed at the bar the night before. And now, sitting across from her, he was wearing a ring on his finger. Panic rushed through her. What had she done? Was this going to cost her the job she had worked so hard for? The next morning, Amina woke up still thinking about him. She couldn't get Japheth out of her mind. The chemistry between them had been undeniable. Now she couldn't believe that the charming stranger from the bar was not only her interviewer's boss, he was the publisher of Reed. And worse, he was married. Everything suddenly made sense, the way he had pulled away from her at the bar and left without saying much. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was an email from Reed Publishing. She opened it slowly, bracing herself for rejection, but instead, the message read, "Congratulations, Amina Glover. Welcome to Reed Publishing." She had gotten the job. She should have been thrilled, but all she could think about was how complicated this was about to get. "This is going to get messy," she whispered to herself. When her first day at Reed finally arrived, Amina got to the office early, determined to make a good impression. She stopped at reception to introduce herself when a familiar voice called her name. Japheth. Their eyes met. Without a word, he motioned for her to follow him upstairs. Inside his office, he closed the door behind them. "I owe you an apology," he began, keeping his tone firm and professional. "What happened at the bar was a lapse in judgment. It won't happen again." Amina felt a small sting of disappointment, but she kept her expression calm. "You don't need to worry," she said evenly. "I'm here to do my job." Japheth nodded, relieved, and changed the subject. Later that morning, Amina met the rest of the editorial team. Bella, the chief editor, introduced her warmly. "Everyone, this is Amina Glover," Bella said with a smile. "She's joining us as our new editor." Miyuki, one of the team members, waved and smiled. Riley, however, stayed quiet. He had been at Amina's interview and had noticed something strange between her and Japheth. Bella continued with the introductions, then announced, "Riley, you'll be Amina's mentor. Help her get used to the system and share projects with her." Riley gave a short nod, his eyes staying on Amina. Just then, the glass door opened again. A woman walked in, elegant, confident, and smiling softly. She headed straight toward Japheth's office. Everyone watched as she passed. Amina's stomach tightened when she saw the wedding ring on the woman's finger. She knew exactly who this woman was, Japheth's wife. Across the room, Riley noticed the way Amina's expression changed. He didn't understand what was going on between her and Japheth, but he silently promised himself that he was going to find out. Friday morning came, and when Amina reached her desk, she stopped in shock. Stacks of folders covered her entire workspace. They were piled so high she could barely see her chair. Her cubicle mate, Miyuki, looked uncomfortable, about to explain when Riley appeared with his usual serious look. "This is your first assignment," he said flatly. "Type and edit all of these scripts before Monday morning." Amina stared at the huge pile. "That's impossible," she said, her voice rising. "Even if I worked all weekend, I couldn't finish all of this." Riley didn't respond. He simply turned and walked away. Even Miyuki looked confused. "He's being unreasonable," she whispered. But Amina didn't want to complain. She wanted to prove herself. So she stayed late that night, typing and editing as much as she could. Hours later, the office was quiet except for the sound of her keyboard. She was still working when Japheth came downstairs to grab a file. He stopped when he saw her still at her desk. "Why are you still here?" he asked gently. She explained about Riley's assignment. Japheth smiled and pulled up a chair beside her. "You're dedicated," he said. "But don't overwork yourself." As they talked, the air between them changed. The same tension from the bar returned. They laughed softly and teased each other, forgetting the world around them. And before they knew it, the distance between them disappeared. They broke the rules they had set, and kissed. After that night in the office, both Amina and Japheth agreed, without saying it out loud, to act as if nothing had happened. They told themselves it was a mistake, something that couldn't happen again. But pretending became harder every day. In meetings, their eyes met longer than they should. Small conversations about work turned into longer discussions that stretched late into the evening. Amina tried to stay focused on her job. She was doing well and earning quiet praise from Bella. Yet no matter how much she tried to bury herself in work, she couldn't stop thinking about Japheth. His presence filled every space, the sound of his voice in meetings, even the way his cologne lingered in the elevator. Japheth, on the other hand, was fighting his own battle. His marriage to Zuri had grown cold long before Amina entered the picture. At home, he and his wife barely spoke. They were basically business partners, two people sharing a house but not a life. But with Amina, things felt different. She was open, genuine, and unafraid to speak her mind. She reminded him of the kind of passion he had once hoped for. But every time he looked at his wedding ring, guilt hit him like a wave. He had made vows, and now he was breaking them. A few weeks later, Reed Publishing sent a small team to a book conference in South Africa. Japheth was leading the group, and Amina was chosen to join. She tried to act professional, but inside she was nervous. Being around him outside the office felt dangerous. The first few days went smoothly. Amina took notes and handled presentations, doing her best to ignore how often she caught Japheth watching her. One evening, after a long day of discussions and dinners, the team split up to rest. Japheth and Amina found themselves walking back to the hotel together. They stopped by a small cafe for coffee. At first, they talked about work, but after a while, the conversation shifted to more personal things. Japheth spoke about his marriage. He explained that it had never really been about love. It was arranged years ago between his family and Zuri's, meant to strengthen business ties and keep both families' reputations intact. Over time, the relationship became more of a polite routine than a marriage. As Amina listened, she felt a mix of sympathy and discomfort. She didn't know what to say, only that he sounded lonely. She could see the man behind the title, not the boss, but someone quietly trapped in a life that didn't fit him anymore. "I shouldn't be telling you this," he said softly, looking down at his cup. "Maybe you just needed someone to listen," she replied. When their eyes met again, everything they had tried to suppress came rushing back. The attraction, the tension, the longing. Back at the hotel, they hesitated at her door. Neither wanted to be the first to leave. One look was all it took, and the distance between them disappeared. They gave in completely to what they had been denying for weeks. It was passionate, but it felt both wrong and inevitable. The next morning, they avoided eye contact as they joined the team for breakfast. No words were exchanged about what had happened, but both knew something had changed forever. When they returned to the office a few days later, Japheth became distant. He no longer stopped by Amina's desk or lingered after meetings. He was pulling away, and it hurt more than she expected. She tried to convince herself that it was for the best, that what happened in South Africa had to stay there, but her heart wouldn't listen. Every time she saw Japheth pass her office, her chest tightened. She knew she had fallen for a man she could never truly have. Now, pretending nothing happened was no longer possible. Meanwhile, Riley noticed the tension and started to watch closely. He believed people who worked hard and followed the rules deserved to move up, not those who crossed boundaries with the boss. So when the company's travel records listed Amina and Japheth staying at the same hotel in South Africa, Riley began to dig further. Late one evening, he accessed office communication logs. He didn't expect to find much, but what he discovered confirmed everything: messages between Amina and Japheth that went far beyond work. Riley checked the building's late-night security footage. There it was, the night they had stayed behind after everyone else left. It was the final proof he needed. He knew what would happen if he exposed them. But in the end, he told himself it wasn't personal, it was about protecting the company. So he gathered everything and sent them anonymously to the company board. The effect was immediate. Within days, whispers began to spread around the office. The HR manager called her in for a discussion. When she sat down, she was told that she was being placed under review for unethical conduct involving a senior executive. Amina's stomach dropped. She wanted to deny it, but there was nothing she could say that would erase what had happened. The guilt she had been trying to ignore now crashed down all at once. Japheth heard the news the same day. The board requested an emergency meeting with him. Japheth, one of the board members, said, "We believe it's best if you consider stepping down as CEO. At least until things get investigated." He sat quietly, feeling everything crumble. When Japheth got home late that evening, Zuri was waiting for him in the living room. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, her phone in her hand. The screen was lit, showing a series of photos. Zuri stood up slowly, holding the phone out toward him. "I got these from someone at your office. I guess they thought I deserved to know." She looked at him quietly. "I'm not shocked, Japheth. We both know our marriage hasn't been real for a long time. We were never truly in love, just two people trying to make things work because it was convenient." She took a slow breath. "But even then, you should have respected me enough to end it before going to someone else." Japheth's voice was low. "You're right. There's no excuse for what I did. I'm sorry." Zuri nodded lightly. "I'll have the divorce papers sent next week. I think it's time we both stop pretending." She picked up her bag from the table and headed toward the hallway. Before she left, she said, "Take care of yourself, Japheth." Then she walked out, leaving him standing alone in the room. By the next day, every gossip site in the publishing industry was talking about it. Reed Publishing CEO in scandal with junior editor. The story spread fast, and Japheth's board couldn't contain it. Within a week, he was pressured to resign. One evening, she found the courage to visit Japheth's office. Most of the staff had already gone home. He was sitting at his desk, staring at the city from his window. "I'm sorry," Amina said quietly. Japheth didn't turn around right away. "You don't need to apologize," he said after a pause. "This is my fault. I should have known better." "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to destroy anything." He finally looked at her. His eyes were heavy with regret. "You didn't destroy it, Amina." "I did," he said slowly. "My marriage was already falling apart, but that's no excuse for what I did. If I was unhappy, I should have ended it properly. I should have divorced before crossing that line, before breaking my vows. And now I've hurt everyone in the process." Neither of them knew what to say next. Her career was hanging by a thread, and the man she admired was losing everything he had built. All because of one choice, one moment that neither of them could take back. Amina couldn't take it anymore. Before HR could make their final decision, she handed in her resignation letter. She didn't want to wait to be dismissed. Packing her desk was harder than she expected. She had come to Reed Publishing with dreams, but she was leaving with a broken heart and a damaged name. Japheth appeared at her desk. He looked exhausted. "I heard you're leaving," he said quietly. "Yes. There's nothing left for me here," she replied. He nodded, understanding. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said softly. "We made a mistake, one I'll carry for a long time." Amina didn't know what to say. She simply nodded. "I hope you find peace," she whispered. Japheth smiled faintly. "Peace doesn't come easy when you've made a mess of your life." Amina picked up her bag and walked past him without looking back. A week later, Japheth officially stepped down as CEO. He moved out of the city and began to rebuild his life piece by piece, far from the company that had once defined him, and the woman he could never forget. Months passed, and Amina had slowly rebuilt her life. After leaving Reed Publishing, she started a small editing agency out of her apartment. Sometimes she thought about Japheth. What they'd shared had been real, but it had also been wrong. They had both paid the price for it. Still, sometimes she caught herself wondering how he was, and whether life had been kind to him since everything fell apart. One evening, as she went through her inbox, a new manuscript submission appeared. The author's name froze her for a second, Japheth Reed. She hesitated before opening it, unsure if she was ready to read his words again. The title read, "The Editor's Mistake." She took a breath and scrolled to the first page. There was a short dedication. "For the woman I shouldn't have loved, but did anyway." Amina read it twice, then leaned back slowly, a faint smile stayed on her lips. She didn't know if he had sent it hoping she'd read it, or if it was simply his way of closing a chapter they had both left unfinished. But the message was clear, their story had mattered, even if it couldn't last.